Hey folks, I wanted to do a little video here on my thoughts of Risk Shadow Forces after my group's first three plays. Um, kind of give an overview. There will probably be some spoilers in here, so if you don't want to know anything about the campaign, I would stop watching now. I'm not going to go over the specifics of what we did, but I am going to go over the objectives in the first three missions. So if you don't want that to be spoiled, then please stop watching. Um, that being said, my group, we are playing four players. We have played through the first three games. Three of us have experience with Risk Legacy as well as other Risk games. And then one of us has played a handful of Risk games. Weren't sure if they were Legacy or not, but we'll say would be a novice towards the game of Risk. So for is game one is basically Risk Legacy, with a few caveats. You are going to modify the board immediately out of the box before the first game. One player gets to do that, so they get to modify two countries. Um, this is based off of a basically high die roll, so there's nothing else outside of just luck, pure luck. Um, the player that won that ability basically, I believe they thought they were modifying a country near Australia that was going to hinder Australia, but in my opinion, I think it actually made Australia stronger. Um, it added two benefits and one negative, in my opinion. It decreased access to Australia from Asia, and it allowed the player that starts in Australia to advance further into Asia while maintaining a bottleneck into Australia. The downside, those are the two positives. The downside is that it if you play Australia, at least in game one, it took you a minimum of 3 turns before you were quote unquote out into the world and being able to interact with people. Um, I guess a third positive would be that allowed them to basically accrue a massive army um, in game one. That their border, they only had a single country border, and they just were able to just shore up that border essentially. Um, so our first game took, I think, roughly about 3 hours. 1 hour of that was basically explaining rules for the newer player, then going over the rules that are different from Risk Legacy for the three of us that are very familiar with Risk Legacy. Um, and as well as the initial setup, the initial campaign setup, and the game one setup, and all that stuff. Because there's a lot of stuff to do. You got to choose your, excuse me, you got to choose your warlords and name them, and then you're going to get your factions and all that stuff. Filling out, do like the initial work, setup work for a campaign in any game. Um, the game one, like I said, is basically Risk Legacy. In this game, however, though, you are going to have two decks of cards you're going to be pulling cards from that you can play that will have a significant impact on the game. Many of these cards are going to give you extra troops to immediately add to whatever country that you control that you want. Some of them are reaction cards you can play. For instance, somebody declares an attack on you, you can play a card that will either destroy a couple of their units or will add a couple units to your defending territory. Um, there is a cost to some of these cards. There is the currency in the game is energy instead of with Risk Legacy it's the coins. Um, but with this game, it's energy. There's a track on the board to track your energy. You start with 5 energy. at the beginning of every game. That can be modified based off of various things. Um, and when you accrue troops on the start of your turn, you're going to get your 3 troops on turn 1. Then in future turns, plus your continent bonus, however many new troops you gain, that's also how much energy you gain. So that your energy is going to be constantly increasing. We have not been in a situation where we've wanted to play a card and not had enough energy to play it. So it seems plentiful, at least at this point. I don't know if anything is going to modify that in the future in terms of cards that have increased costs on them, or if maybe we just haven't been playing our cards as often as we should have. But I think that we've played them in situations where it was warranted and they were useful, not just playing them to play them. That's pretty much the major difference in this is the card play, and it does affect things pretty drastically. It can swing a fight pretty quickly, or for instance, if you're going in to attack an opponent and they have 3 armies there, and you're bringing in 6. Normally, you're probably going to be a safe bet for you to comfortably take that country, but now with those cards, you don't know. They could have a card they're going to play that give them 3 extra armies, or 6 extra armies, so forth and so on. So it definitely makes you think twice before invading a country. Also, each warlord has a special ability that you really need to remember to play. Some of them are once per game, and some of them are once per turn. It's something you definitely need to keep in mind to continually to use. Additionally, there are, if you attack so your warlord will be out on the board. If you attack with your warlord, your lowest die is increased by 1. No, you can re-roll all 1s. I'm sorry. And if you're defending, you can re-roll all 1s. So that's something else to keep in mind. That being said, game 1 went fine. I started in Australia. So it took me, like I said, turn 3, basically turn 3 or 4 until I was able to actually interact with somebody else. And by that time, I had a massive army. I only had a single border into what was Australia and southern Asia, and I was able to amass an army at my border. While I was doing that, the player in South America attacked the player in Africa. They had a couple skirmishes, and then the South American player overran them and took their headquarters. There was a player in North America who was basically shoring up his borders with South America and starting to come over into Asia. As the Australian player, I did not really worry about that because of the country that was modified. Essentially was taken out of the game, so they did not have a direct path to come down into Australia. They basically had to go around the outside of Asia to get to the Australian player, which was me. Game is won by taking 4 domination tokens. Every player starts with 1, and then their headquarters counts as 1. So as soon as the South American player took the headquarters from the player in Africa, they had 3, and you can spend 20 energy at the start of your turn to purchase a domination token, and they had 20 energy. So at the start of their next turn, they basically could have won the game. At that point, the North American player was basically forced to come south and take the headquarters from the South American player, which that person did. They were successful. Um, and then they stopped there, and then I was forced. Then my turn was next, and I was forced to try to make a run to basically grab the African players' um, headquarters and the South American players' headquarters. And I was successful in that because of my massive army. I also played a couple cards that forced some armies to move around and attack. Um, I had a card that I played that basically allowed me to pick an opponent and force them to make 3 attacks. And so I picked the opponent. I picked the player in Africa, had them attack the player in South America. They both lost a couple of armies, and it also moved the African players' armies away from the countries that I wanted to move into, to kind of get my shot into their headquarters and then straight over to South America. I was able to do that and secure 4 domination points and win game 1. Pretty standard game of Risk Legacy outside of the card play, which I think helped. I like playing the cards versus just. I mean, I know there were cards in Risk Legacy where you could, for every number of coins, you would get more bonus armies at the start of your turn, but these just add another risk, I guess I should say, to attacking or defending. Because you never know what your opponent is going to be able to play to augment what they're coming in with. And there are other cards that do other things. That deck that I am referring to is called the Warfare deck, and that has countries listed on the bottom, has the special ability they can use in the middle, and then possibly could have an event that comes on top of the card. That if it's revealed and there's an event, then you do what the event says. I think that one event's like if somebody has an army in the country on that card, then they get 4 bonus armies in that country. There were some other ones that took away, like draw the next 2 warfare cards and remove an army from each of those countries. So that type of thing. Just kind of shift things up a little bit. I enjoyed that. I thought that added another little another risk to the game, and it wasn't just simply moving dudes on a board and then you're at the mercy of the die rolls. I like there was a little bit more things that could change the game up a little bit. So that was game 1. Again, basically Risk Legacy, but roughly 3 hours, and that's about an hour of setup / teaching. Game 2 is the skirmish mode, and the skirmish mode is essentially your warlords. It's just a minis game, essentially. Each player is going to have their warlord figure out on the board plus 2 squad tokens. And there's going to be, at least for the first skirmish game, there was an objective that we had to complete. And the first person to complete the objective got a bonus for the next game. There were essentially 3 hostages. We didn't know which hostage was which, but a particular hostage being saved netted 5 additional energy for game 3. And then the other 2 were 2 and 1 extra energy, depending on who they were. The skirmish game is very simple. It's basically move and attack. Both of those are optional. There is to try to open a door, you have to hack the door open. So you have to make a test, which is basically a roll of a dice plus your modifier. And then if it's 5 or better, you open the door. Very, very simple skirmish game. It was probably about an hour after teaching, so it probably took us like maybe 45 minutes to play through that skirmish game. One thing I do not like is all the squad tokens are the same color, or it's the same token. There's no indication of whose token is what, which squad belongs to which player. So you have to remember which squad is yours, basically. I suppose you could put like one of your army guys on top of it, but they're gonna fall over and get knocked around. I just wish they would have given each player a squad that was in their color, essentially, to make it easier to recognize uh, whose was whose. Other than that, was fine. Um, yeah, it was okay. It was okay for the length that it was, for the 45 minutes, maybe an hour. If it's going to go any longer than that, then there's not enough to do. It's just I just feel like if the future skirmish games are going to be longer than like the hour mark, then it's probably going to be just a little too long in the tooth, because you can move and you can attack. That is it. There's no playing a card. Each warlord has a special ability that helps them out, but it's not. That's it. You're just moving and then attacking if you want to attack, and then moving again and then attacking if you want to attack. Um, there's no host of cards you can play to. Okay, this time I'm gonna do two moves instead of an attack or something like that. It's just very stripped down um, skirmish game. At least game two was. You're gonna play 5 skirmish games out of the 15 total games in the campaign. Um, so there's that, and it did give you a bonus for the next game, which, spoiler alert, did not matter at all, at least for our game. The bonuses were energy. You get more. You start the game with more energy. Like I said, even in game one, none of us ran out of energy. We were playing cards that were helping us, and we'd have to pay the energy cost for them. But I think the max energy cost was like 3 energy, and you're getting at least 3 energy per turn. You should be getting 5, 6, or 7 energy per turn based on what continent you have control of. So none of us played more than 1 card per turn, or had cards that would allow us to play them more than that matched what we wanted to do in game one. So let's move on to game three. Game three, and this is very spoilerish. So if you're still watching and you don't want to be spoiled, or have any idea what's going on in game three, then turn back now. At the end of game two, you are going to add some things to the board that are going to open up a lot more options. You're going to be adding 2 new continents to the board, and you're going to be connecting those continents to countries of the player who places them their choice. So needless to say, Australia is now connected to Africa, as well as more ways to be connected into Asia. There's also now a new continent, at least on our board, in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, which connects South America to Europe to North America. So additional ways to get in. And there was some strategic choices made there based on the scar card stickers that were put out during game one, to try to get around those essentially. It's definitely going to make it so that there are multiple ways into each continent now. That a player can't just shore up one section of their continent. They're going to have to split their troops, and it's going to be tougher to defend, basically. Like I said, some of the player who won game two basically starts with 5 additional energy, and then depending on who got the other 2 hostages, they could start with 2 or extra 1 energy. The other thing that happens at the start of game 3 is that there is now a Shadow Forces army that's like an NPC army that gets put out on the board. It has all the player pieces, 3 armies from each faction on it. And at the start of each player turn, it moves. So you roll a dice. Each of the countries has a number 1 to 6, like on the connections, and whatever number is rolled, the army moves to that next that next country and removes one of their armies they have and puts down a control token that acts as one army. In game three, the way to win is to, again, you could have the 4 domination tokens, you could be the last player left alive, or you could be the person that kills the last last Shadow Forces army piece. So basically, for game three, the stars aligned for me. I started in North America. The Shadow Forces army started in whatever country that is that connects right into Alaska. They started there, and I went last. I had 4th turn. So first player rolls the dice, and the Shadow Forces army moves into North America. Then takes their turn. Second player rolls the dice. Shadow Forces move adjacent to where I have my headquarters in North America. Then that player takes their turn. Third player rolls the dice, and they move around to another side of my base, but not attacking me yet, based off of that die roll. Then they take their turn. Then my turn goes. I roll the dice, and it moves on to a third side of my base, but not attacking me yet. And then I take my turn. At this point, the Shadow Forces had control of 4 countries in North America, and I was essentially forced to try to go for broke and just take out all their armies, which I actually succeeded at. So I wiped out all their armies on the tile they were. That's the first tile I went for, because I had all, I think I had 9 starting armies plus the 3 I got at the start of my turn. And and my warlord, and I was able to successfully, through the play of in Risk Legacy, they're called missiles. I can't remember the technical term for them in this game, cyber something or other, but it's basically allows you to make any roll of 6. I started with 2 of them, and through everybody played their missile. Everybody tried to stop me. They did what they were trying to. They tried to stop me, but they were not successful in the end. I had enough troops to succeed. Now, I did have to play a card. After I conquered 3 territories, I did have to play a card. Drew a card at random from the Warfare deck that allowed me to play it immediately, to give me 6 more troops. So I basically had 18 troops to play with, and that was enough for me to go through all of their armies through the dice rolls and the playing of the cyber tech, whatever those things are. So I won game 3 on round 1 of my first turn, because I was able to wipe out all of the Shadow Forces armies. Again, the stars aligned for that to happen. The dice rolls, perfectly moved the Shadow Forces army to my doorstep, and then I got lucky in my die rolls. Yeah, it's that game 3 was won on the first turn, so it was less than 30 minutes of play probably. Um, I won, so I don't really have a problem with it. But the other players may I don't know how they felt. It was one of those things where it sucks for them because they lost, but and not lost basically first turn essentially, but we really kind of they understood, like I had to do that. I had to try to do it. That was my only path. I'd lost basically half of North America already, and the player who started in South America dumped all of their troops on the southern border, and they were getting ready. They were going to do, if I didn't do it, they were going to be able to do it on their third turn essentially. And the other 2 players one started in Australia, so they were at least 4 turns away from being able to interact with anybody. And they're probably 3 turns away from being able to, no, 4 turns, because nobody started in Africa, and then the other player started in Europe, and they were at least 3 turns away from being able to attack the Shadow Forces army. So if I didn't do it on my first turn, the South American player probably would have been able to do it on their 3rd turn, because they were 1 turn after their first turn. They were still 1 turn away from getting to be adjacent to the army, and to go from there. So yeah, I don't. It does kind of suck that it ended that quickly. Well, not for me, but for everybody else. I I don't know how. It does suck that it ended that quickly. At the same time, I appreciate that there is for this game there was another way to win outside of just attacking somebody's headquarters. Um, I, I like playing Risk Legacy, but it just gets old. Just give me a different objective, other than just attacking somebody over and over and over again to try to get their headquarters. I mean, give me something else to do. This was something else to do based off how the dice rolled. It made it, it was easy for me to do. Not easy, but I think I had 3 armies left by the time I was finished. So I had to get that card. Like, if I didn't get that 6 army card, I would not have won on the first turn. I would have won on the second turn, but I would not have won on the first turn. That 6 army card allowed me to win on the first turn. So that was a lucky card draw, and the lucky dice rolls for where the army moved, and the rolls for the combats that more or less went my way. I do like the addition of a different objective to win the game. That might have been a too bit of an easy objective, at least for the way things went for me, or for our game. Now, if the army had moved into Asia versus coming straight over into North America, yeah, the game's probably going to go for several turns. But I appreciate that it was a different. It gave something. It gave an objective for everybody to strive for outside of just attacking everybody else, which I thought was good. I hope more of the global games in this have different objectives, other than just wipe out everybody else. At the same time, I hope that it doesn't turn into a co-op game. I think there should be tension. There should be. They're kind of slowly introducing a big bad that threatens all the players, and I hope they don't introduce it in such a way that that becomes the prevalent threat that everybody has to gang up and not attack each other. I think they need to keep it at a nice balance of, okay, this is a threat. The Shadow Forces are a threat, but you also need to be attacking the other players as well. So we'll see. Again, we're 3 games in. Those are my thoughts. So far, I'm having fun, but I've won 2 of the 3 games we've played, which may be part of why I'm having so much fun with it. I think the other players are having fun as well. It's definitely has that Risk Legacy feel, but it's also different. Different in a good way, I think. I don't know how I feel about the skirmish yet. It was, like I said, it was quick, it was simple, it was something different, but we'll see. I think that hour mark is going to determine whether those skirmish games are any fun or not. Anyways, that's my initial thoughts for Risk Shadow Forces after roughly 3 games. Thanks for watching.